Well, good morning, everyone. It's Peter Crewe-Brown here. Welcome to another episode of the Mind Over Matters podcast by Pair Planning. The topic for today is Let Others Deliver, You Should Perform with Donal O'Neill. Donal helps people from all walks of life to overcome their fears about speaking and presenting in public. A bit more about Donal. Over 30 years in the entertainment industry, Donal went from being a person who was afraid of his own voice to being a confident speaker in front of hundreds of people. Along the way, he learned lots of do's and don'ts, some of which he will share with us today. So about today's podcast, just a little more before we start. Doctors perform an examination. Soldiers, on the other hand, perform their duties. Professional truckers perform a U-turn. Yet often we talk about presenters or speakers delivering a presentation or speech. That's the wrong approach. So what I'd like to do now is just turn over to our guest, Donal. If you wouldn't mind sharing with the audience what makes you tick, and also who in the business community do you serve?
What makes me tick, Peter, would be here for the next week. Never mind a podcast. Or I suppose really in the aspect you're talking really about in the business, my own business. What makes me tick?
Yeah.
I probably am on a mission to rid the world of poor presentations, and the reason for that is the definition of a business is to sell something. It can be a product or it can be a service, but you sell it for a profit. Now, if there's no sale, there's no business.
Sure.
So that's a fundamental given, right?
Yeah.
Now, if you take that back a step, selling, one of my, I would nearly call him a mentor, there's a fellow over here, his name is Peter Thompson. And Peter has a beautiful statement. It is a wonderful statement. It says, selling is a transfer of belief.
I heard you say that a few days ago in a presentation, and it's one of those things that really made me pause, because it's not something I'd heard before, but the more I've thought about it, the more it resonates, and it's very powerful. Do you just want to repeat that? So it's
yes, certainly. Selling is a transfer of belief.
Yeah.
Now, if you think about it, Peter, if you have any sort of ethics at all, you must believe that what you have to sell, be it, as I say, be it an object or be it a service, you must believe that what you have to sell is going to be of great benefit to your client, right?
Yeah.
If you don't believe that, you shouldn't be trying to sell it, right?
And I think, Donald, to that point, I mean, if it doesn't, you're not going to be in business for long.
Absolutely.
Yeah, because if people aren't getting benefit, they don't hang around out of some charitable leaning. They leave and they tell everyone else about it, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, they say that, they'll tell one person if you do a good job, they'll tell 10 people if you do a bad job.
Exactly.
And that is a fact.
Yeah.
And the days of the fly-by-night salesmen, they're gone.
Sure.
Sales has completely changed now, and thankfully it has become much more ethical.
Yeah, and so I think the social proof we get from recommendations is very pervasive, and people don't listen to the service provider of how good they are. They'll go and see what other people are saying. So yeah, that sort of social proof and getting good recommendations is all powerful nowadays.
Oh, absolutely. But if you think about it, Peter, if you do have that belief, which you should have, that your product is going to do something wonderful or your service is going to do something wonderful for your client, if you believe that, and if you can transfer that belief to your client, you no longer have to sell anything, because your client wants to buy from you.
Sure.
Right? Yeah. So the question is, how do you transfer that belief? And that all comes down to communication.
And that's
why
essentially
is so important.
Yeah, and that's what you do, right? You help people to effectively transfer that.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely. Be it in a presentation, or it can be on Zoom, it
Yes.
can be on podcast. Where I love it to be is on a stage in front of a room full of hundreds of people, because that's where I just get the buzz from that these days.
Sure.
But the bottom line is, if you need to be able to communicate why whatever it is you have is just so good for whatever your client needs, and that communication is key.
And in terms of who in the community you serve, I mean, you serve anyone who has to get the message across, either in a live environment or on Zoom, or whenever they're interacting with a potential client.
Absolutely. I mean, as I said already, there is no business without a sale. It doesn't
Yes.
matter what business you're in. If you're in business, you are a salesperson, whether you want to be a salesperson or not,
Sure.
and you have to make the sale. To make the sale, you have to be good at communicating. The better you are
Sure.
communicating, the better salesperson you're going to be, and the better your business is going to be.
Yeah, exactly. And Donald, this is a little off subject, but I know that you live in a part of the world where I have not, I guess, done a lot of Zoom work with before. Maybe if you just very quickly share with the audience exactly where you are, to give a sense of, I'm in Sydney, Australia, and you in a much different place, right?
Oh, absolutely, yes. I'm in Northern Ireland,
Yes.
which, to people from Australia, they probably wonder why we even talk about Northern Ireland, because Northern Ireland, if you go any further than 150 miles in any direction, you fall off, right? It's that small. That's the whole island. Now I
Okay.
know we're 300 miles from top to bottom, basically.
Yeah. Okay.
So I know that in Australia, 300 miles is nothing. I know you guys would jump
Sure.
in the car and go for a jaunt for 300 miles, no, without thinking about it. It's a
Exactly.
major journey for us. So Northern Ireland is at the top of Ireland, sort of northeast to a point.
Yes.
We have a total population of 1.9 million people, so it's not big,
Yes.
but it is a very nice place to live in. It's aesthetically beautiful, lots of greenery,
Yes.
lots of beautiful. We have the biggest inland waterway in the UK in these
Okay.
islands.
Yeah.
Lots of waterfalls, lots of beautiful walks. And the big benefit we have over you guys and us is that we don't have anything that wants to kill you. There's nothing going to sneak out of the bushes and bite you or chase you or do things like that.
Exactly. Yeah. Well, very good. Look, thanks for sharing that. Just a bit of context. Just moving along with the podcast for today, Donald. I have a bunch of questions, which we have obviously discussed in advance. The first of them, if you like, is I know that there are many approaches to the subject of speaking and presenting. What's your specific approach?
Basically, there's three things. First of all, you have to be able to engage the people you're talking to.
Yeah.
You have to be able to educate them about what it is you want them to do, be it buy your product or take your service on board, or if it's not business, say it was politics and you want them to give you their vote. For instance, that's another example of the same thing.
Yeah.
And I also think that it makes your life a whole lot easier if you can just sprinkle a little bit of entertainment in there as well. If you can get them to like you, if you can make them smile or laugh, you're on a winner.
Yeah. And to be honest with you, when I first met you and saw your profile on LinkedIn and learned the work you do, I felt that given my perception from afar of the way Irish people are, they've always got a story, and they love sharing with other people. It seemed to me that just using my perception of Irish people, that it was an obvious, I guess, field for an Irish person to be in. So, in the little time I've got to know you better, I've found that you're certainly ideally suited for this pursuit.
Well, that is something that it was like a light bulb going on around about 2017.
Sure.
Because I had been thinking, as you said in your introduction, I mean, when I started out over 30 years ago, I really was genuinely scared of my own voice on a microphone. I didn't want to use it. And a lot of people are like that,
Yeah.
And I went from there to being somebody who just loves talking in front of hundreds of people on a microphone. And along the way, that journey was punctuated by lots of humorous disasters.
Yeah.
And every one of those humorous disasters taught me something. And I thought to myself in 2017, there are a lot of speaker coaches out there, people who will coach people how to speak, how to present, and so on. But there's absolutely none of them have my journey, because it's
Sure.
pretty unique, right?
Yeah.
And I thought I can put a course together, which I did back then, to using the benefit of my stories to teach people the things they need to know. And
Yeah.
that's how I got into this.
And my perception, I'm an older guy, so I guess I would say this, but people who've kind of gone the whole journey, learned, from the bottom up in the old days before all the technology, are often best placed to be, teachers and trainers, because they know it from a very sort of deep level, rather than, sometimes more sort of inexperienced service providers in this space don't have that depth of knowledge and experience to be able to really bring to the audience, the deep learnings that you share.
Well, the unfortunate thing is that the people like ourselves, really, who we've learned the hard way. It's a
Sure.
real pity
Yeah.
that we've learned the hard way, but it's a great thing if you can save other people that pain and
Sure.
let them learn from your mistakes. Let them learn from the mistakes I made. And a lot of the mistakes that I made, as I say, I'm able to illustrate them with
Yeah.
quite graphic and humorous experiences that stick in their mind and
Sure.
get the point across. So, as I say, if they can benefit from the mistakes I've made during the years, that's brilliant. That's what
And
I
I
like to
guess
see.
that is the essence of the next question. So just moving on to the second question, if I may, what are the main things then that can destabilize a speaker or presenter? And what can they do about, I guess, addressing these issues?
Well, there's a number of things. The first thing, you come across the odd person who wants to do it off the cuff.
Yeah.
And I've met very few people who can do it off the cuff and do it well. You
Yeah.
know, uh, they think they're scared of losing their spontaneity.
Sure.
Well, the best speakers I've ever come across, they actually rehearse their spontaneity, and that works
That's an
really
interesting
well.
concept, isn't it? It's almost a
Mhm.
contradiction if you think about it on a
It is.
first blush. You rehearse your spontaneity. They kind of two opposing words, but
Correct.
coming from an experienced person like you, I guess that's a good thing for any aspiring presenter to think about.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the more experience you get, you build a sort of a bank in the back of your head somewhere, that whenever something occurs that has come out of left field, you weren't expecting it. Uh, the first time it happens, especially if you're inexperienced, it might throw you, and that's one of the pitfalls that's there in front of people. There was ways of getting around that, but after you've been doing it for a bit of a time, you'll discover that your unconscious takes over, and you
Yeah.
can delve into that bank, and you can deal with it. There are a number of straightforward things to do, and one of the things to do if you're presenting either on stage or on Zoom, and something happens. If it's stage, it could be somebody dropping a tray full of glasses when you weren't expecting it. All of a sudden, the entire room is looking back somewhere and they're not
Yeah.
looking at you. Now, the worst thing you can do in a situation like that is to carry on as if nothing happened, because something has happened and everybody knows something has happened.
Yeah.
And if you ignore it, then you're the only fool in the room.
Yeah.
You have to acknowledge it, preferably make a comment about it that acknowledges it, and then carry on, and
Yeah.
everybody's with you. I heard a story recently about a guy. I'll not go into too much description, but this guy was, let's call him a champion speaker on a
Sure.
world level, right?
Yes.
And he was invited to give a talk, and his speech involved, he was baking something on stage, right? And he was going through the whole thing, and he was cracking eggs into the basket, and he missed or did something silly, but the eggs went all over his trousers. And instead of acknowledging it and saying, "Look what I've done, am I not silly?" he pretended it hadn't happened, and the whole place was laughing at him, and he lost all credibility. And this guy should have known better, but
Yeah.
he didn't. So you
Yeah.
have to acknowledge when something unusual happens. don't ignore it, acknowledge it, mention it, and
Yeah.
then carry on with your
Yeah.
speech. That's really important. The other thing, particularly, I mean, things that can throw you, that's what you were asking me, things that can
Sure.
put somebody off. And this is what scares speakers, you know, especially inexperienced ones. First of all, they tend to lack confidence. And not only that comes from experience, and it also comes from knowing that you can deal with whatever comes up. So one of the ways to do that is the way you learn. I hate to use this term, learn your speech, because that's not what I mean. The way you have assimilated in your head what you're going to say. And the reason I'm saying that way rather than learn your speech is I would always advise people never, ever, ever learn a speech word for word. Never learn
And
a
I think
speech
for a rookie, that's the thing a lot of people would think is the norm. It's like learn,
absolutely
learn,
not.
and learn so you can't be distracted. But I think the problem is you then you come across as a robot, don't you?
Well, that's one of the problems. You come across as a robot, you lose your personality. And the second thing is you can be distracted because the waitress drops the trays full of glasses or whatever, or the cat walks across the screen. And then once you've been distracted, the problem is you have to try and remember exactly where you were
Yeah,
in what you learned.
sure.
And that's where you really get lost. And you see people having mind blanks. And that's one of the reasons they have a complete mind blank, because they learned it word for word. And they're now terrified they can't get back to where they were. They've forgotten, or they can't grasp it. And they start to fumble and the whole thing falls apart. Now, the way around that is to learn the path of your speech. Every speech will have a path. You start out before you ever come up with a talk, no matter what you're trying to do with it, you think of your objective.
Yeah.
What do you want your audience to do once they've listened to you?
Sure.
You know, do you want them to buy from you? Do you want them to go and vote? What is it? That's your end. Your start is obviously when you start to speak, and then you have little stops along the way, and call them bullet points in your mind. You know, and that's what you have to learn. What the next bullet point is. You know? So if you get distracted between bullet point 2 and bullet point 3, all you have to do is remember, oh yes, I was heading towards 3. I've just left 2. You know, so you can quickly recount, and away you go.
So it's like a signpost on your journey.
Very much so.
Very much. So you've got a reference point if you get distracted to pick up and not get flustered by being disoriented where you were in speech when you got the interruption.
Yes, and the great thing with that, Peter, is once you know that, right? You can be so confident that no matter what happens, you're going to be able to continue on. If somebody asks you a question, one of the worst things you come across with a lot of presentations and speakers, is the speaker goes on, gets halfway into it, and he or she, somebody from the audience says, "Can I ask the question?" And they say, "No, leave your questions to the end." Now that is the worst thing you can do, because by the end the question is not relevant anymore.
Sure.
You know, because people have forgotten what you were saying. Wouldn't it be so much better if you can say, "Yes, what was your question?" Address the question and then go back onto your journey and continue on from where you were without any worries. If you've learned it word for word, you can't do that.
Sure. No, that's really thought-provoking. The next question I have, Donald, is a bit of a variation on the previous one. So it is, what are, say, the 3 biggest roadblocks concerning public speaking that your clients have?
Undoubtedly, the first one, Peter, is confidence.
Okay.
Now, there's very, very, very few people who start with confidence, you know, before they've done their first presentation, their first speech, because we naturally don't, most of us anyway, naturally don't like everybody looking at them, right? And they always think, oh, what happens if I make a mistake? Everybody's going to laugh at me or whatever. So the first thing is confidence. Now, one of the things that helps get over that is you have to realize that your audience wants you to succeed. Your audience does not want you to fail, you know, because they feel terribly uncomfortable if you're up there dying on stage. They're dying with you, you know. So they're willing you to be successful, you know. So that's the first thing to help you build up your confidence. The second thing is, I don't want to, well, I suppose it is kind of way laziness, you know. You really have to put the work in. You know, if I'm doing a presentation, be it a 10-minute presentation to a networking group, or be it a 2-hour seminar, I will rehearse that presentation or seminar at least probably between 15 and 20 times. And I
And I
rehearse it
guess, and
out
when you're
loud.
doing that, you will try and mirror the actual live event as best possible. So you wouldn't read a speech in your head. You'd read it out loud, right?
You have to do it out loud, because what
Yeah.
you find is things that you can think of, when you try to verbalize them, you trip over the words, or the words don't fit properly. It just doesn't sound right, whatever.
Yeah.
And also, when you do it out loud a number of times, your brain seems to click in and say, here's a better way of doing it. And you try
Yeah.
it. And rarely does what the 19th version is so different from the first version. It's unreal. Yeah. But it's much, much better.
And one practice that I've heard of before, and I've done a few times myself, is recording it on the microphone on your smartphone and listening to yourself back. I found that's quite a good way of really getting a sense of the pacing and whether you come across authentically. Is that a practice you suggest?
That's certainly not something to do. But you know what's even better these days? Zoom. You can record yourself on Zoom. You can actually just set up a new Zoom meeting with nobody else except yourself and deliver the whole speech. You record it on Zoom, it times you, and you can see how well you come across, and you can hear how well you come across.
Yeah, that's a brilliant idea.
That's even better than doing it on the telephone, because you can only hear yourself on the phone.
Yeah. No, I agree. Yeah, and you can, we're all very self-critical, but if you are self-critical, I guess you'll find areas to improve, and that's the whole idea of practicing.
That's it, exactly.
Yeah.
Nobody has to be perfect. But one of the things, it's an old adage, but whenever you're speaking to a camera,
sure.
Imagine you're speaking to one person.
Yeah.
Because everybody in there is looking at you, and they all think they're speaking to them, which you are effectively. But imagine you're speaking to one person. I can't remember who it was, but it was an American election, probably back in the 30s or 40s.
Yeah.
Television had been coming out then, maybe 50s, early 50s.
But it was American more the 50s.
Yeah, it would have been the 50s. I can't remember who the two people were. I should remember, but I can't, especially at this time of the night for me. One of the candidates spoke as if he was addressing the nation, the crowd.
Yeah.
And the other candidate spoke as if he was speaking to individuals. And he was the one that just wiped the election. He just ran away with it, because he came across so well,
And I guess the people in the audience feel more special when someone's speaking directly to them.
Absolutely. One of the one of the methodologies of speaking to a live audience is to divide the room in roughly 4 quadrants, depending on the size of the room. Obviously, if it's a really, really big room and very wide, you need to use more. But a standard sort of rectangular room, divide it into 4 quadrants, pick somebody in the middle of each quadrant, and make a point of looking at them quite a lot. Now, if you're looking at someone and they're fairly far down the room, the people beside them think you're looking at them as well.
Sure.
And everybody thinks you're looking at them, and then move over that side, and then move a bit down here, and so on. And spend a bit of time, don't stir them out, because that gets freaky, but constantly look at them friendly and all the rest of it. And it works a treat, and everybody feels that you're making that little human connection with them.
Sure.
And they want to be your friend, and they think you're their friend, and everything works very nicely, because that's what we seek.
Sure. And so in a Zoom environment where, often we've got 10 or 20 people, would you look at individual people in the Zoom room, the individual pictures of them?
Well, obviously on a Zoom, what you need to be doing is looking at the camera, right?
Yeah.
If you're looking at somebody down there, you're not looking at the camera. It doesn't look like you're looking at anybody, But
that's the little green spot on the top on the screen, really, isn't it?
That's
where the recording's happening.
Exactly. And some people, there's an old trick. It's very simple. If you take one of these things,
sticky note. Post-it note.
Right. Draw a face on it, right?
Yeah.
Cut a wee hole where the nose is.
Yeah.
And stick it up on your screen, and have the hole where the camera is, and talk to the face.
Yeah. That's a brilliant idea.
And it works.
No, that's really good. Just moving along, so I mentioned if you had, the 3 biggest roadblocks that your clients have, experienced relating to public speaking. You've mentioned a few there. I didn't keep count. Is that kind of it? You've got through most of the ones?
Well, say confidence is the first one. not wanting to rehearse is the
Yeah.
second one. And the third one is probably not having a good structure to
Yeah.
what they're talking about, not learning the pathway of
Yeah.
what they want to get across. So there's a whole methodology behind that,
Okay.
which is simple. Like it's not rocket science, as they coin the old phrase.
Yeah.
It's
Yeah.
relatively simple. It's all about human communication.
Sure. And just having a structure that's worked in the past for other people and being true to that every time you do a presentation.
It's basically, as I say, your end point is your objective. What you
Yeah.
want them to, what you want your audience to do.
Sure.
You obviously have your start point,
Yeah.
which is another thing. How do you grab their attention at the beginning?
Yeah.
And then, as I say, to get from the start to the finish, like any journey, you're going to pass through various towns along the way, or various
Sure.
points along the way. So
Yeah.
remember, you know what those are. They're logical. They make
Yeah.
sense.
Yeah.
And therefore you're getting in there. And it's not a scary journey because you know where you're going, you know where you want
Sure.
to end up, and you know
Yeah.
what you're going to say when you get there.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
that in itself, knowing that alone gives you confidence.
Excellent. Well, look, that's some excellent, I guess, ideas there. Moving along to the fourth question, Donald, what benefits have you seen from clients who have adopted your strategies, the strategies you teach?
They become a lot more interesting for a start. Basically, they end up getting better sales. I mean, that's the first thing, because people want to listen to them.
Sure.
I have worked with people who really are very, very good at what they do.
Yeah.
They have a good service or a good product, but they're not very good at selling it.
Sure.
And I mean, I'm not a person who teaches sales. I'm not teaching sales. I'm teaching communication. But I think communication is the absolute basis for good sales.
Sure.
So
Yeah.
if you can come across as first of all, as a very human person,
Yeah.
a very with empathy for your client, and you come across in a logical manner in the way you're presenting whatever it is you have to sell, then you are going to do better. And that's what I find with my clients. They've got more people listening to them,
Yeah.
and if their product is good, then
Yeah.
they will sell it. You just need more people to listen.
And I guess that's the thing, if you can be the best service provider in the world, but if you can't, what's that thing you were talking about, the transfer of
belief.
Yeah. So if you're not able to effectively transfer belief, no matter how good you're offering, you could become a starving, service provider.
Absolutely. Yeah, definitely.
So getting the message across is absolutely key. I mean, it sounds so obvious when you say it, but there's a lot of people who just, don't have those skills. And I guess for a reasonably modest investment, and I know that at the end I'll give you an opportunity to talk about a course you're running soon, but there are people like you who help, service providers who need to polish up their presentation skills, and it can transform their businesses.
To be fair, Peter, the people there are a lot of people out there who have created a business with a product, say, right, that they could have invented or come up with, or a service that they've had the brains to develop, and that was their forte. They are an inventor, or they are somebody who builds something or whatever. Their forte isn't necessarily selling that thing, and I've come across that so often. The real geniuses at making something are absolutely useless at selling it. But the thing about it is, it can be taught.
Sure.
And that is the point. It can be taught, and it maybe they don't want it to be taught to them, but they want you to teach it to somebody who works for them, and that can be done as well.
Sure.
So it's not, as I say, it's easy to do.
Yeah, excellent. So just moving on to our final question, Donald. Do you have any quick tips or takeaways the audience could implement sort of immediately after the show?
Yeah, certainly, no problem. Well, the first one is this. It might seem a bit obvious, but whenever you're doing something like a podcast, or doing something at a networking event, or if it's a bigger thing on a stage, there will be someone who introduces you. In your case, you introduced me. In a stage, it'll be the MC for the event.
Yeah.
Especially if it's a conference or something like that, because this poor person is having to introduce maybe 30 speakers over a full weekend, right?
Sure.
That person either hasn't got doesn't know enough about you, or hasn't got the time to come up with something good. and they're liable to come up with something terrible, right?
Sure.
So rule number one, always write your own introduction.
That's
right?
a great
And don't
tip.
hide your
Yeah.
name under a
Yeah.
bushel. Always write your own introduction. So, and I would always say to you, you know, do it in such a way that the person is reading it out and they're saying, well, this next guest has done this, and this, and they're qualified in that, and that. If you want to say that sort of thing. And the last thing they say is, please welcome, you know, Peter Crewe-Brown. You know, your name is the last thing they say.
Yeah.
And you walk onto the stage to a round of applause. So you're
Yeah.
off to a great start. You know, it's really good.
Yeah.
So write your own introduction.
Sure.
The second thing is, when you do get onto the Zoom meeting or the stage, don't start by saying, thank you very much to so-and-so, and thanks for, it's great to be here. And all. Forget that. You've already been introduced. Start off, grab the audience quickly. Now, there's a number of ways to do that. One of the ways to do it is to ask them a question. You know, a rhetorical question. You're not actually looking for an answer, but ask them for something that sort of makes them sit up and think. I did a presentation 3 weeks ago at a network group here, and it was about presenting. And the first words I said after the introduction was, have you ever thought what was going through the mind of the first person to parachute from a great height in the sky? It had never been done before. You know, what was going through that guy's mind, you know? Now, people were expecting me to talk about presenting, and all of a sudden have them picturing some guy in a parachute. You know, that was they were not expecting that. All of a sudden, they're engaged. They want to know why I'm talking about parachute. Yeah. That got them on board. I then was able to develop that into the whole idea of preparation, et cetera, et cetera.
Yeah, and so you've got you win them over immediately with that question, instant engagement.
Absolutely. It doesn't always have to be, it can be a question just to get a yes from them, you know. Yeah. But I like the rhetorical that makes them think something along those lines.
Yeah, a little deeper.
Gets them to engage with you straight away. You know.
Sure.
Now, I mean, you can come up with a controversial statement and they go, "What?" You know, but that's a wee bit risky. You gotta be sure of your audience on that one. So that's the second thing. And probably realistically, the third thing is what I'm saying. You got to plan your journey. Sure. You know? And it's not that hard or to do, but that's very important. And then I could say that the other thing is rehearse.
Yeah.
You know?
Yeah. Cool.
Always.
Okay. Well, look, that's been brilliant. You know, I've learned a great deal myself. I've seen some of your presentations before, and you've certainly reinforced some of your important messages. Donald, just finally, given you've been so kind, and I'm sure there might be people in the audience who would love to know more, and you know, I'm sure they'd love your style. I know you're presenting a 3-part presentation workshop. How can people get in touch with you to find out more? Is it through LinkedIn?
LinkedIn is probably the best way, because you're in Australia, I'm here, and I mean, at the moment we are doing this on 3 Mondays. Yes. They are
the 1st, the 8th, and the 15th.
Yeah. They're an early enough start in Australia, but if there was a whole lot of people in Australia who wanted us to do this, we'll do it. I don't mind doing it at 3 o'clock in the morning in my time. You know, if needs be, make it more suitable for people in Australia. You know, happy to do that.
And the spelling of your name, just so people looking for you on LinkedIn?
It's Donal. That's D-O-N-A-L.
Yeah.
And Donal O'Neill, O-N-E-I-L-L.
Excellent. And so for anyone in the audience who would like to get in touch and find out more about the course, or just be in contact with Donal, please feel free to reach out. So that pretty much gets us to the end. It's been an absolute pleasure catching up with you today, Donal. I really appreciate your honesty and your great stories. I do love listening to you. I guess we could speak for ages. So look, just from my side, it's Peter Crewe-Brown signing off from episode 5 of Mind Over Matters podcast.